There's no odd side of the street.
We're clearing the slate.
So,
You're on it.
it's always interesting when we get those
Good
reporters.
evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is our meeting started actually at 6:30. We're sorry interrupting poker time, or whatever Tom was showing at the time. Were you showing Ed Targan?
8th annual IPA.
Oh,
Okay,
there you go.
No! 8th annual IPA.
all right. So we're gonna interrupt the Polish dancing temporarily, to come back at our meeting. We had, gone into executive session at 6:30 to do a couple things. One was to finish off our discussion on the police union contract with the chief, and also we talked with the chief concerning the schedule and the manning of the schedule. The chief is getting ready to post the shifts for May 1st, bidding on those shifts, so we're just reviewing that with the chief. So that's why we are in it, and we also, one of the things that the board does is that we have learned over time is that we have, when election is forthcoming, we have to go back and address any executive session minutes that we have, so that we all can vote on those. And I think we had 6 executive sessions for the last year, and dealing with a couple of variety issues. Police contract was probably the biggest one of that group. So we're clear. Those are approved. We have to do one more meeting to take care of tonight's executive session, but we'll do that before the annual town meeting.
Yep.
All right, so before we go into, we were supposed to meet with the police union at 7:30. Until then, we have the minutes from March 25th. Is there a motion?
So moved.
May we have a motion made
Second.
of the minutes of March 25th as presented? Any further discussion? All those in agreement signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, 3-0 on that. Margaret, next up, we'll talk about the capital plan, the warrant review. Margaret, you want to give us a regional EMS update?
Yes, the group continues to meet. There's been meetings where attendance has fluctuated, and I know that our ambulance director he's faithfully attended all the meetings. The town administrators have attended all the meetings. At this point, we're working on drafting an MOU. We do have parts of it. Drafted, and we're building on what we have. I have developed a draft PowerPoint presentation. I don't know if the board has seen it yet. But that is, I know it meets with the chief's approval, but that's something, it's only got 8 slides, it's very brief, and it's to the point. You want to look at it, or, yes?
Not right now.
Okay, so it just addresses the issues right now with the local EMS structure and opportunities with the sub-regional EMS service. So
Okay.
that's the report that was due April 1st.
Well, we'll look at the in a second, but
Yeah.
we had 2 minutes.
Oh, no, that's fine, yes. I just,
Unless
yeah,
you want to hit the fast forward
Can't go
button.
there for that fast.
that's what, no, we don't want to keep the appointment waiting.
All right, 7:30, we're supposed to be meeting with the police union, so, Peter Scoble is the union president,
Yes, sir.
right? Is that your president, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know, I forgot what the official titles are.
Nomenclature, sure.
Come on up, Peter.
Thanks.
Sit down. Peter is an officer. Most of us are looking at the inside of our eyelids when Peter's up.
That's right.
And so most people don't see Peter's face, fortunately. All right, Scott, where do we stand with the contract? You are,
Well, if I could, Mr. Chair, it was, as it has been now, my pleasure for the last 3 years dealing with Peter and the negotiating team for the police union. Each of the last 3 years, we've taken a very different perspective. In years prior, contracts prior, we've negotiated all 3 years of either cost of living and or other compensation components. In this particular contract, this is the last year, this is year 3 of the current negotiation, the union, understanding what was going on with the town in 2009, recognized that the volatility of our revenues wasn't going to really be practical to look at 3 full years forward, and agreed to, and I want to thank them again publicly, for each of the years during the 3-year negotiation to open up just the labor clause around cost of living increases, to understand the revenue stream the town had, where the pressures were both from people who make a living keeping us safe, as well as people who pay into the tax system to allow for the service that the police department provides. And this is our last year, and over the last negotiation, we have come to agreement of a 2% increase, which is a little less than, well, it's in alignment with the Selectmen's recommendation, a little less than Personnel Committee. I will say this, and I won't steal your thunder, Pete, with respect to some of the positions taken during our discussions, this board has expressed pent-up demand inside of departments, and clearly the negotiating body for the police union has expressed some pent-up demand as well. And we completely recognize that, and I think all of the negotiations, because it's a relatively rare occasion we get to negotiate 4 times in 3 years. But in each of those 4 times in the last 3 years, it's been with open eyes and respect both ways. So I want to thank the union for the effort that they have put into that. And it's not always easy work, both ways. It's not always easy work, so I do want to thank that. The current recommendation was for 2%, and we had a memorandum of understanding based on this, which is actually, I think, Article 10. And I think that's what we're here to talk about tonight.
Okay, Pete?
Not too much to add. I think that in the future, I don't know if it's something that we'll do, but it worked this time, going year to year. Obviously, it would, well, it's just the times called for it, and we agreed to that 3 years ago, and it worked well. 3 years goes by quickly, though. And 1 year goes by even quicker. Although we don't see each other that much. It seems like a year went by pretty quickly before, and we were already meeting again.
Right.
That's the only, 3 years goes by so quickly. Obviously, it'd be nice to come to agreement for 3 years, but it worked this time, and perhaps it'll be something that'll be useful in the future. Otherwise,
I think one of the things that works, if I may, Peter, is that the base contract that the union has with the town, most of the hurdles that we have in there, we seem to be able to get over those pretty easy. That's why the coming back on the wage adjustment, I think, worked, because there's not a lot of pent-up demand on either side to change mega changes to the contract.
Right.
Not that the contract is perfect in our opinion, I'm sure it's not perfect in your opinion, but there's checks and balances in the contract that it really allows something like this to happen, so that we're not having to reopen, so.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. It certainly wouldn't be something that I don't think anybody would think is necessary for other than wages, anything other than wages. The rest of it, obviously after 3 years, there's things that people think of that are worth it. Anyway, but for the wages, it worked this time, and we'll see, because we're at the end of it. This is the last of the 3 years of this contract, and we'll see
So we can start
what
anew.
happens for the next one. Yeah.
We can start anew. So right now, Mr. Bergeron, you have tentative agreement with Pete and the Massachusetts Coalition of Police Local 398 on a 2% COLA per our contractor.
That would be the recommendation, the fine work of our office, the chief, the team, Margaret, and negotiations.
Okay. Peter, if it's okay with you, we're gonna vote on that right now, and then, so at this time, I would entertain a motion to amend or to actually add to our contract with the police for this year. The parties agreeing that the cost of living percentage COLA to base wages for the contract year beginning July 1, 2013 shall be 2% for all employees in the collective bargaining unit, subject to ratification by the union and the Board of Selectmen and contingent upon town meeting funding. And continuation, item 2, all other provisions of the collective bargaining agreement shall remain in full force and effect.
I'd like to make a motion as
We have a
stated.
motion.
Second?
Peter, is that okay with you? Sound right?
Yes. Yes, sir.
All right, so we have a motion made and seconded. Any other discussion, Mr. Bergeron?
No, again, just, well, if I could, shortly, yes. The reality is, it was a treat working with the union on each of the budget years, understanding both revenues as well as what it takes to actually be here employed in the town of Sunderland.
And, all right, so we have a motion made, David? Or seconded? Any
Second.
comments?
I'm good.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Now we have the grand signing of the paper.
Pete, you want to start? We'll have one original for you and one for the board.
Great,
Okay.
thank you.
Guess just thanks to everybody who worked on that.
It's to the board. We'll start passing it down the table, okay?
Yeah, one of those things with ink in it. Okay.
Okay. Second.
Time, you get a pen? You got
I
a
got
pen.
invisible ink.
Thanks again, Pete.
Thank you.
Early morning meetings were a challenge, but
I
got through them.
I appreciate that too. That was definitely what was best for me,
Yeah, yeah.
and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks. Have a
See
good
you
night.
again, thank you.
All right, so when do you want to schedule our beginning of our next contract negotiation?
Thursday morning, Pete, 7:30? Wednesday.
Can I go to Disney World and come back?
Yes,
Ah.
All right,
You're going to Disney.
Exactly.
okay. Margaret, we got a couple minutes. Can your presentation fit in before quarter up?
Yeah, sure, it should be. Yeah, make it really quick. Hold on here. Well, it might take that long to open it up. Okay. All right, so this is the proposal.
Kathleen, could you shut the first row of lights off, please? Perfect. Just one row's enough.
I'm not gonna even bother.
Perfect.
This is
Thank
gonna
you.
be really quick, so I'm not even gonna bother taking the slides off the side panel. So the proposal between the towns of Deerfield, Whately, and Sunderland.
So just to review,
Okay, yes.
you're not, the 3 towns aren't ready to proceed with this.
The town administrators and the ambulance directors have not come up with a final draft of an MOU to present. So, the idea, the hope is to actually bring forth, a plan in each of the towns sometime between October and January of the coming year.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank
So
you,
the
Margaret.
proposal is for a sub-regional ambulance service, and this would be staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it would be a paramedic level service that would provide first response to all 3 of the participating towns. Currently, I can actually move on to the next. Why is change necessary? Well, currently, you can read through the screen, but I'll just touch on some of the highlights here. It's, the ambulance directors have found it very difficult to recruit and retain call force personnel. They acknowledge that times are changing, people's jobs are bringing them out of town. The demand is great, the training demand for EMTs and paramedics is extensive, and it creates additional demand on call forces now. All 3 of the towns rely to some degree, in a couple of cases, a large degree, on advanced life support intercepts. The town of Sunderland provides a basic EMT service, so any advanced life support services that would be required to be provided by intermediate level EMS or paramedic services have to be called into town, and the town of Sunderland has to pay for those. So the town is, in Sunderland's case, is spending is spending money on advanced life support intercepts. This proposed service, because it would be paramedic level and be able to provide that coverage, is expected to significantly decrease, if not eliminate, ALS intercept needs. And this is just additional information on the lack of manpower and the costs for the ALS intercepts. In addition, with regard to equipment, each town has one ambulance. By combining the services, there would be the availability of a primary ambulance and a ready reserve backup ambulance in the same location. So there could be additional staff called in if the primary ambulance is out to have that second ambulance go out as well.
If you look at bullet 4, I think bullet 4 is very interesting.
Oh, it is, and that is a major problem. That is a major problem right now, particularly during certain hours where you don't have staffing in the station.
Right.
I mean, Sunderland has very limited staffing in the station, only daytime hours, and so it relies 100% on call force personnel for anything outside of those daytime hours, and so
Basically, patients may wait for at least 30 minutes or longer for an ambulance.
that's correct. And
So-
it may not even,
So Tom Zanoski would be better off ordering a pizza.
It would get here faster,
It would
yeah.
get there quicker.
yes. In a lot of cases, well, in many cases, it's not even the local ambulance that ends up showing up.
Right. it'll
They
be
just
out of
can't
the-
staff it. It ends up being an outside ambulance service. And again, the intercepts the town has to pay for. So, yeah, so that's what we've got. And this is just evidence to support the times. I will do a more formal presentation at some point later on. But you can see in these tables that it takes more than 5 minutes in almost 70% of the cases for Sunderland's ambulance to get to its call. And those calls are under 5 miles from the location of the station. So it's, there is prolonged.
That's just getting out of the door.
That's just getting out the door, right?
Get
That's
into the-
out of shoot time, yeah.
Site.
Yeah, so there is prolonged response time with call force personnel. And it's not just Sunderland seeing this, all 3 towns. In fact, many call towns are seeing the same issue. And well, actually, this is a slide that's not completely done yet. I do want to come up, this is something I'm still working on, I do want to come up with the percent of calls that Bruce referred to in the meeting in Deerfield about the percent of calls, the really high percent of calls with no response at all, so. And then, the benefits, I've gone over a few of these already. 90% of the responses, at least 90% would be covered, and with improved response times. The paramedic level service would provide high-quality clinical care through well-trained, highly trained personnel. The reliance on mutual aid would be significantly reduced. All 3 towns rely on mutual aid to a large degree. First call response, I went over that. The ambulances would be housed in one location. The proposed location at this point is in the South Deerfield Fire District building. We are still working on that. And then the duplication of efforts would be eliminated. And finally, the planned apportionment of costs would be a 50-50 formula based on each town's population and EQV. And Sunderland's anticipated year-one cost, given the budget that we've been working with, would be $196,058. That, in year 1, would be partially offset by the town's ambulance reserve fund balance, which we are actually going to know for town meeting next week, or the end of this week. So there would be cost to it, but it would provide much higher quality care. And that's the presentation as it stands right now.
Okay, Margaret, thank you.
You're welcome.
Kathleen, lights? Around here in Sunderland, we utilize all our resources,
Knew that was coming.
even if we don't pay them.
Volunteers, huh?
All right. You all set with that?
Yeah.
All set with the EMS.
That's funny.
What's up next?
Well,
Looks like
Have
you're
three.
contingent for Frontier.
That's
Come on
right.
now. There's no reason to send that
FY14
back.
capital is next.
Exactly right.
And the board does have some new materials in your agenda packets
Yeah.
that the superintendent brought in. Yes. Yes. Yes,
This
that's
one,
it.
right.
How are you, Scott?
I'm well, Marty. How are you?
Fine, thanks.
So it's- congratulations to both of you.
Oh, thank you. Probably more so to her.
Bob, how are you? Good. I'm well, thanks.
I was at the meeting where they elected Marty. They wouldn't let me ask my question, though.
Uh-oh.
That's good, Tommy.
Huh? Why would you want this job? No one asked her that. I thought that was an easy question.
Somebody's out front or out back, Dave? Kathleen, is that your car out front?
Car out front
Okay.
You can tell what kind of car it is.
It just went off.
Somebody's in it.
Oh, it's even worse, right?
Yeah.
I can't get out of the car.
Sometimes I carry my keys in my pocket,
Yeah.
and sometimes I push things and
Mm-hmm.
don't even realize it.
Yeah, very much the same boat with that.
Yeah.
Can't much go wrong. So you're gonna get through the year,
Hmm?
gonna get through the year, you're gonna
Get
go
through the
from
year.
90 hours to about 190 hours,
Sure.
right?
Sure. Yep, I'm gonna take a vacation.
Yeah, right.
You are.
I am,
Wait a minute.
before I leave this job.
Oh, okay, that's different.
Well, we just signed a contract with the union, the police union. The president of the union's gonna go to Disney World.
There's something about that.
Yeah.
Really?
So
They do an
when you
India road
accepted
trip.
the superintendent's job, Bahamas?
I hate to tell you, we had a trip planned in London, so that's our,
Nice.
but it was
That-
before,
Well, the only thing I can tell you is the secretary treasurer of the men's club
yeah,
always seems to take a trip to Ireland right at the end of the year reports. So
ah,
he
okay.
doesn't report what's in the budget the month before the trip to Ireland.
Well, it's either Ireland or Alaska. You never really know.
We haven't figured that one out, but it
Some,
seems
there's
to be
some relationship to the balance
a
sheet.
pattern keeps reoccurring.
Exactly.
All right. Superintendent Nash.
We'd like to
Hi,
talk to
Regina.
you a little further about the Frontier capital plan. I think
Absolutely.
when
Thank
we
you
were
for
here
coming
last
tonight.
time, Scott was not able to be present, so I have Bob and Marty with me this evening to talk a little more about it. I guess I'd like to preface by saying that my understanding is that there's a possibility that the tennis court, which is about $29,000, could be done through Deerfield CAP,
CPA.
CPA monies, at which Marty will be going to a meeting on April 4th, and I think they're supposed to let her know that evening if they will fund it. In talking further with Margaret and with Lynn Sibley in Whately, there is, I think, also a possibility that we could fund the track, if not this year, perhaps next year, with the same sort of funding, because the track would be under recreational,
Okay.
and that's one of the options. Now, that would obviously take 4 towns agreeing to do that. I am looking to get on the meeting agenda for the next meeting of the CPA group here. And I'm talking with Lynn and Bernie as to how it would work in their towns and also in Conway. But as Bob can elaborate on, we can probably go one more year on the track without damaging the infrastructure, because it's resurfacing that we're looking to do. We also would like to avoid those shin sprints as well, but Bob can talk a little bit about that. So if we did those 2 things, then that would eliminate that second article. On the first article, I think there's been a lot of concern about the HVAC. And I want Bob to explain all of these in greater detail, but basically, I think Tom and some other people have thought that maybe Green Communities Grant could sponsor that. And I did find out today that our major audit that was done at Frontier is several years old. We would probably need a new audit to be done. energy on it before we went further. And the other items come under safety and security, electrical and equipment. And I have looked at those figures and came up with a new total based on that information. But I do want Bob to address all of it because I'd like Scott to hear it firsthand rather than through me. So Margaret, if you pass those down, that looks at some new totals. And I think I'd like Bob, if you take it from the top and talk about some of these articles here and what the meaning is behind them.
You want me to start with the HVAC ones and say
Yeah.
the safety ones?
Yeah, why don't you do
Okay.
that?
The two HVAC upgrades that we're currently talking about are a control upgrade to a portion of the unit ventilators in the building. We've got a small portion done. This amount of money would allow us to do the rest of them. We have an energy management system in the school at Frontier. It was put in during the original renovation. It's been there quite a while. The technology at the time that was installed was to use pneumatic actuation and electronic controls. The pneumatic actuation has not been working well for us. We've had really good luck upgrading those unit ventilators and getting much better control by putting electronic actuation in. So this project would complete all of the classroom unit ventilators in the building and upgrade those from pneumatic to electronic actuation. And that would just leave a small amount of pneumatics on the air handling equipment. The three-way valve is the valve in our heating system that tempers the boiler water temperature based on outside air temperature. About 2 years ago, we replaced the pneumatic actuator on that valve with an electronic one, and it's been working pretty well mechanically, but it's a large 10-inch butterfly valve, and it doesn't seat well anymore. So in the shoulder periods in the spring and fall, we end up with heating hot water temperatures a lot warmer than they should be, which make control very difficult with our unit ventilators, which don't have individual valves. They just have face and bypass dampers. So that project is to replace that large valve. On electrical, power to the garage is a relatively straightforward project. We've got a small garage right next to our shop that doesn't have power. We have a real issue in my mind with people coming in to do snow removal and maintenance early in the morning and essentially working in the dark in that garage. That's a safety issue to me. Surveying the emergency generator. We have an emergency generator in the school. It's a good generator. It's in good repair. We've had a service contract on it for the life of the generator. There's talk about utilizing the school as for sheltering, and in light of that, I'd like to have someone look at the generator and total up all the connected loads and make a determination whether there's adequate capacity there to add additional loads, and also determine what those loads would be, so that we've got a safe, secure generator if we do move forward with.
Do you load test that, Bob?
Pardon me?
When you do the service, do they load test that also? Do they bring in a load bank for you and load that up to 100% or? not?
What we've done normally when they come and do the service, all they really do is run the generator. On a couple of occasions, we've turned it over and actually checked the transfer switch.
Right.
But neither the service contractor or our staff have load tested it. As part of this survey, yes, we would load test a generator.
It'd be interesting to see if anybody ever did.
Right.
Because like when we looked at Sunderland Elementary School, the paint on the turbocharger was still
Mhm.
brand new, so they had never loaded it up, so that was one of the things.
And actually, there's a lot of equipment in Sunderland that's way oversized.
Oh, yeah,
Right, yeah.
well, actually, what we do is
Frontline.
in bad storms and stuff, we generate for, Old Amherst Road.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
there
they're
you
the
go.
first to, yeah.
Send
In
me-
South
send
Bend.
me
You never
some
go
sense
down.
out there you go.
The two equipment purchases that we're asking for is the GMC pickup truck that we use for maintenance in the high school. It's 13, going on 14 years old. We had some issues with it this last year with rusted brake lines and brake failure. My particular concern with that truck is we use it a lot, but we also use it a lot to trailer around relatively heavy equipment. We do the mowing for Hurley Field, and we transport several pieces of equipment there pretty regularly during the mowing season. And the van for the high school is a 15-passenger van. It also is about 12 years old, over 100,000 miles, and it's used regularly, almost daily, to transport students. Within the last few months, we've had that thing towed in twice. Once when it was in Holyoke, we had to have it towed in because of a fuel pump failure, and then more recently, we had an issue with tires. So those two pieces of equipment, again, were probably bought roughly around the time of the renovation of the school through bond, and are just getting to the point where they need to be looked at.
Want to go back up to safety and security?
Pardon me?
Safety.
Go back up to that one?
Okay, the safety and security stuff. Basically upgrading the building security system. That's the system that we currently, that is used at night when there's no one in the school. That system pretty much has failed. It's also, even before it failed, it was an issue because of a further project down here, which is rekeying the exterior doors. When it was operational, we were constantly getting calls from the local police that the alarm was going off because we have people come in the building that really aren't familiar with the alarm system and end up setting it off. But above that, more recently, it has failed and needs to be replaced. Most of the wiring and some of the components may be salvageable, but especially the main panel on the system needs to be replaced. Safety straps, basketball hoops. We've got 6 hoops in the main basketball courts. Particularly 4 of those hoops are pulled up to the center of the gym when we have games and stuff in the gym, and if the cables on those did break, those hoops could come down into the bleachers, which is a big issue. Current code for new installation would require these safety straps, and I'm concerned, and I think that that's a real important add. Studying the classroom lab hoods, we did a walkthrough with the school committee several months ago at Frontier, and some questions came up about the lab hoods in the building and whether they were all operating at current technology. That would be a very expensive project if we did it to every hood in the school. So what I'm suggesting is we have someone come in and do a survey with the teachers and make a determination. I think it's only 1 or 2 of those classrooms that really are being used in a manner as which would require us to upgrade the hoods. So if we, and I think there's probably, what, 10 or 12 labs?
10 labs.
In the building. My hope would be we'd identify 1 or 2 critical labs and do some preliminary design and some budgeting on what it would take to upgrade those hoods to be sure that they're adequate.
So are your labs pressurized also? Or are they just, do they have, work under a positive?
Fresh air makeup.
Yes. But we're only, the two labs he's talking about are the chemistry labs.
Ooh. Be a good idea if you have any
Mhm.
students like me there.
You remember that far back, huh?
I remember Mr. Farrakhan sitting in the back room, yes. Yes, I do.
By the door.
Yes, I do.
The thumb turns on the classroom door locks, with all of the current issues related to safety and security and drills in the high school, we have seen in the high school and all of the elementary schools that most of the classroom doors, as they were previously designed, require a student.
That's okay.
Pardon me?
We don't need to
Stop.
know
Yeah.
that.
You don't need to hear that one, okay?
And you understand, I mean, certain
We
things
do.
that we don't need to know.
Okay.
Yes.
And I would ask, we went to, we had a Franklin County Selectmen's Association meeting on Thursday night of last week.
Last Thursday, yep.
And one of the things we had, David Sullivan, the district attorney, was speaking, and he was talking about safe schools and about offering to do audits of schools with you, between that. So I didn't know if you guys had heard about that, and I guess that was one of the questions was, how do we know? And they said, well, you guys should know, but it's like, well, and that was the question, and it really wasn't answered. Well, how do we know?
What we have is a four-town safety, student and school safety committee. We've been meeting about 3 years on a pretty regular basis. It's composed of the police chiefs, fire chiefs, and state police in all four
We have
towns.
seen, yeah, I have seen stuff on that, yeah.
Yeah, along with our principals and Bob and myself. And the state police, there's a new person in charge of safety and security for Western Mass. He's been very, very good joining with the police chief and fire chief in each of our towns to monitor and to do lockdowns and to give feedback as to what is needed in each of our schools. So that's been very helpful. So we have done that. All of these are certainly things that we've discussed with them that they feel we have a need for. I might add that some of these that you, for good reason, don't wish to hear further about, we've already done in all the elementaries.
It was interesting but when the discussion about little things that you can do.
Yes,
And
we have school plans, safety plans for each of our schools, and they've given a list of things. They've told us some things that we need to take off our websites.
Yeah.
It's been very informative. A great group to work with.
it is a very aggressive plan that the district attorney, through the sheriff's department, the Mass State Police, and local chief of police are very aggressively pursuing with schools, so.
You want to get the last couple of them? Rekeying all the exterior doors, in all of the schools, and in the high school is no exception. Key control is important and probably hasn't been done as well as it should. It's some of the issues we have with the building security system. There's a lot of keys out there and we don't have really good control of them. What I'd like to do is rekey all of the exterior doors, identify one or two primary entrances, and utilize a card access system where we have control of the cards, and we can shut them off electronically if they're lost or not returned. And the rest of the exterior doors either would have blanks or a key that's high security and not given out. CCTV cameras, security. Most all of the elementary schools already have that technology. We don't have it at the high school yet. It's good for identifying vandals and other issues, and also if we had an intruder in the school, it would help us identify that. And the electric hold opens on missing corridor doors and stairwells. We have electric door hold openers on the main corridor doors in the high school. We have several corridor doors in the wings, and most all of the doors going out to the stairwells do not have hold opens on them. and are very frequently pegged open. And that's
So that's a
something-
fire issue also.
It's a fire issue. They're fire safety doors and fire separation doors, excuse me, and can't be pegged open. So what we like to do is add hold opens to all of those doors.
I guess I would just say that there's been some discussion as to why now. Well, why now is because the renovation to the school is about 15 years ago. And that was a renovation, so we have parts of the school that are even older. So what we put forth, because of Bob's diligence since he's been here in making a list, we brought to the school committee not a one-year plan, but basically a 5-year plan in terms of looking at some major projects down the road after the bond is paid off on the renovation. And we would be looking at building envelope issues, roofing, et cetera, that hopefully MSBA would be part of that funding and would be done under a bond because of major cost. What we're looking to do is some of these things that really we can't wait for that 3 to 5 year period that we need to have done. I would also remind this board as well as other town boards that in the 12 years I've been here, and I'm sure the 3 years before that because the building was so new, we've never asked for any renovations or any money for capital improvement for the Frontier Regional School. Whereas we certainly have for the elementaries, and people have been very generous with those in each of the 4 towns. But we're getting to the point where Frontier also needs some help. And I credit Bob with bringing all this stuff to our attention, and I credit the school committee for really taking a deep look at this and making some priorities along with Marty as to what we should look at first. But it's really the age of the building that's making a determination as to some of these issues. Because when we had that bond 15 years ago, we bought a lot of this stuff, such as the van and the truck, et cetera, all under that bond. So everything sort of comes up at the same point of time.
Well, before we go into this further discussion, I have one good thing about the being on the negotiation team is that you have an opportunity to walk through the school, and the school's in very good condition.
It is.
And that's a credit to the administration, and the janitorial staff and his staff also that make that happen. And it's true, if you walk through the school, I mean, it's easy, and little things start happening. Ceiling tiles start not getting replaced, tiles pop up and not replaced, radiator covers are dented and not, there's a lot of little things that start showing up. But from the areas I walk through, which are high traffic areas, always seem to be maintained.
Right.
So, and I'd be amiss also is not thank the students also, because they can do a lot of damage really quick. So there's some pride in
Right.
the kids that go there also. That being said, so how much total are you looking for the first year? If I'm looking at it, you're looking at a total of
133,250. If we take out the HVAC, which people seem to think we might be able to do under Green Communities, that's 50,000. That is not an item of safety. It is an item to save money in the budget and to make the school operate more efficiently, but it's not a safety item. So if there's a chance of getting that next year, then I think that the school board would certainly agree that the other items added together would be $133,250. Sunderland's share of that would be $35,058.
Scott?
Well, the first thing, if I could, Mr. Chair, Bob, I worked in a couple of projects, and I appreciate the insight that you bring to all of this. You got years in the business of, it's usually not much fluff. It's usually pretty practical. With that said, on the electrical and the HVAC, is there a chance to look at another ESCO project for the building itself?
The issues with, you mean something like Siemens or something?
Yeah, not unlike that.
I guess that's always a possibility.
we still end up with an assessment, however, we end up with a partnership with the installer with some guaranteed performance deliverables, if you will.
Yeah, I would guess that is a possibility.
It's always difficult with a combination pneumatic digital. It's, one's temperamental, one's fast acting, anyway, I totally get that, I really, really do.
We have done a considerable amount of lighting work recently in the high school.
Yeah.
Both inside and outside.
a contractor, and getting rebates
Good.
from Western Mass Electric. And we did quite a bit of negotiation on that and actually got a rebate that was above their standard offer.
Good.
And they did a great job on the
Nice.
exterior lighting. And
So when things like the tempering valve for the boilers, unit heaters, building envelope controls come up, the first thing that comes to mind is, who are the rebate partners, as opposed to simply a capital assessment. That there is item one. Item two is under the thumb locks and all doors, other than the fact that there's a bunch of doors. I totally get that. Is that anything that can be captured inside of a maintenance budget? I say that only because I understand maintenance has been squeezed for a decade. It's been
Yeah.
squeezed badly. That said, you're describing today a building that we know is 15 years, of a fair amount of usage. And is it time to simply take a look at that maintenance budget, and can we do things like this in-house?
I'm not sure, unless we hire some specialized technicians.
Yep.
That we can do this sort
Change
of
lock
work
sets, et cetera.
in-house.
Okay.
If our maintenance budget was increased,
Mm-hmm.
I think we could capture more projects like this. What I've seen for the several years that I've been working at Frontier is the maintenance budget we currently have is stressed.
Sure.
Basically, we spend that out every year, and the business manager does their best to try to back and fill it with money that's available from other locations and that sort of stuff. But the bottom line is, all the years that I've been here, I've seen this backlog
Yep.
accumulating, and I know that it's going to keep accumulating,
Mm-hmm.
and probably exponentially as we're getting older. So I don't think the opportunity to catch many more of these in our regular maintenance budget, which is completely spent out and then some every year. It's a gap that I can clearly see in the budget at Frontier, is there's an operating budget that can take care of the day-to-day stuff, but not these mid-range projects. And none of them in and of themselves sprung to a point where we could call them a big capital project, but the accumulative value of them now definitely puts them well into the capital project range.
Last question, if I could, Mr. Chair. Two things. One, on the security split question. Is the existing fire system robust enough to be able to pick up all of the door holders?
Currently, all of the doors are on, have contacts on them,
Uh-huh.
and there's a significant amount of motion sensors in the building.
Mhm.
So the building is pretty well covered.
Yep.
It's just that the individual panels aren't working anymore.
So this is localized. You're saying the things like the stairwell doors they're asking for holders for, we're not adding to the system. The infrastructure exists. You simply have to replace the holder. Is that what I'm hearing?
The hold opens, you mean?
Yeah, hold opens.
The hold opens don't exist on
Don't
stairwell
exist.
doors.
Okay, but that's why I ask about the robustness of the fire system, because you're adding a fair amount of load to the fire
I see what
system.
you're saying, yes.
Yeah, we ran into that at the
We ran-
elementary school.
Exactly right. We ended up with an entirely, anyway, it can grow beyond just 13 doors. I'm making up a number,
Yes.
and that turns into remote power supplies. It turns into relays forward. Has it been fully vetted? And I trust
A new panel.
a new panel. I trust the work that you've done historically, but I don't see any details about that here.
Yep. Yeah, and honestly, I don't think I can answer that question right now. And what that would do is probably drive the number up a little
Sure.
bit if that happened.
Right. And then the last thing, if I could, with respect to cameras, talking about upgrade to the general security system, I'm assuming that's to integrate the cameras, or the fact that the security system doesn't quite meet the bill currently? you have two items, item 5 on the sheet that I have, and then item 2. Right, security cameras, it says we do not currently have any. I'm assuming you'd want those going into your security system?
I don't see an interlock
So
between
just
the actual
CCTV all
security
by itself?
systems.
Totally
It-
separate.
It's pretty much independent.
Okay. Great, that answered the question. Thanks, Bob. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
David, any questions?
Mostly about like the future structure of funding. Now, you're talking about you bonded 15 years ago, which I assume rates were much higher than they are now. Like, one, any consideration of packaging a lot of this up and bonding again when rates are at
Right.
historic lows? And also, two, what about future, because, and this is, we're all kind of guilty of this everywhere. We build a structure, and then we forget about it, and then it's, oh, well, now we have to maintain it. Really, what we need to do, obviously, is build the structure and structure for the capital upkeep and maintenance at the time that we do it. Easier said than done, but what about going forwards, like structuring? I understand at one time there was an assessment for capital, like perhaps structuring in, and this is something that all of the towns we face every year, we go through the same issue, and we end up trying to come up with a standardized way to do it. But what are you looking at to come up with a standardized structure to maybe help fund this going forward, like an assessment, a separate capital plan assessment or something like that?
Well, let me respond a couple of ways to that. We did last year, with the vote of the towns, establish a stabilization.
The fund, right.
We have no money to put in it. In fact, our free cash, the board put in another $40,000 to bring down the assessments this year. So we're at $125,000 in free cash, that's all we have left. I think the other thing that's been happening in terms of the budget is that we've been trying to keep the budget low. Last year, we eliminated 5 teaching positions, both because of budget concerns and because of a drop in student enrollment. Fortunately, it's not our school choice students, it's our regular population. And it's not that they're going anywhere, we just don't have the kids.
Drop
They don't exist. So that's also a concern. In terms of, I can't say that we haven't thought about this. The school committee's been very conscious of it. And in fact, if you listen to Mary Raymond and Bill Smith, who did the original work on the building committee, and have often told us that the public has said, we want you to take care of the building. We want to make sure that we have a way of knowing when it needs help, and you need to keep the upkeep. And we have done the upkeep, we have notified them, and in frankly, that's what we're doing now. I think we did look, and as a matter of fact, the approval of this was a month late, because the Frontier School Committee asked us to look into bonding currently. And it was not feasible. It's not feasible because, number one, we need more lead time for MSBA, and all those things that we have to jump through hoops and get estimates and do all of that work for the infrastructure. We don't want to bond just for a little bit now and then have all this other work to do in 3 years. So the school committee, I think wisely, after listening to a report from our business manager, indicated that they really would like to do something for year 1, year 2, and I gave you that information for year 2, which is a lesser amount, and then look at, that would give time to look at what is needed in that long-range plan in terms of the infrastructure, which I think Bob could probably speak to better than I can. And at that point, you would be paid off for your current assessments, and you could move forward with some other bond with MSBA funding as part of it.
So that'd be for like years 3 to 5,
Yeah.
those items?
Yeah, and we sort of group those. Now, that's not to say that's static. It's not to say that there might not be other things added at that time or other things that might be changed according to that time. But maybe, Bob, you could speak a little bit to what you saw in that bonding we were talking about.
And also, I'd like to kind of say that to some extent, it was mentioned earlier, that the school is well maintained, and I agree very much. It is very well maintained, and to some extent, that level of maintenance in looking at this group of bigger projects has worked against us, because everybody has been assuming that the school is in good condition. And all I started to do over a couple of years was to just accumulate things that I was seeing. I don't see any of these as a crisis. What may be building, if we don't begin to think about doing some sort of these projects, is 3 to 5 years out, we may have some crises of maintenance. But right now, all we're really doing is looking at the things that need to be done and trying to prioritize them. We do have some long-range, bigger issues. The envelope around the library media center, that metal roof, steeply pitched metal roof that you see there is original to the older construction. And much of the air handling equipment in that area is also prior to the last renovation. So that equipment is giving us problems. That envelope has some severe insulation problems, and it also has some problems with big glass areas that aren't sealed well, and some leaks. And none of those things are simple to fix. We've been working along with what we have, and keeping the problems at least managed, but they're bigger projects that are gonna need to be dealt with. Some of the air handling equipment in that area is gonna need to be replaced. Much of the rest of the controls in the unit ventilators at some point are going to need to be replaced. Let me look at some of the other projects here that I have. The boilers in the building are larger, old cast iron sectional boilers. They're not the most efficient boilers. They're very typical of most of our schools where we have 2 large boilers. Each one is sized to handle the entire load of the building. The second one functions pretty much as a backup. In many of the schools, the high school also, what really makes sense at some point is we keep one of those 2 old boilers running, but replace one of the other ones with several smaller ones that we could run incrementally, and they'd be much more efficient. The energy management system itself is relatively old technology. Not now, but in the next 5 years, we probably want to look at bringing some new technology in and doing some of the new control functions that system isn't capable of doing. We have some major issues in the building with air and water balance that we need to begin to look at. We've got some other pieces of equipment, again, that we bought at the time the school was built. We've got an old John Deere tractor that we use a ton. We've got...
Is it older than 1972?
Pardon me?
Is it older than 1972?
No.
Ours in town is 1972, so...
Maybe that's if we could borrow it.
Okay, they never
So
die.
you're not gonna get a lot of
Deers never
sympathy.
die.
You're not gonna get a lot of sympathy in that one, Bob.
We've got some issues starting to show up in the parking lot where we have some structures that are sinking.
That actually makes sense.
And some major cracks that are opening that I'm not quite, those things are something we're gonna have to have somebody look at and make a determination. But I know what's gonna happen is they're gonna start getting worse every year.
See, for us, I don't think, we as a board don't question that. I mean, 'cause we know it's needed for, I mean, and well, just so you know, in our town, and I guess it's how to integrate, it's how really to integrate Frontier's requests into our capital. So when you look at our capital for our town, we have nine, how many projects? We have like 9 sheets. And
10 years forward.
would have everything on it. And like this year alone, we had $857,000 worth of capital before yours. $857,000 of capital. So we have to go through and we have to, in the 857, there's a $400,000 fire truck on there, so we went from 857 to 457 real quick, but it doesn't mean we still don't need that fire truck.
Right.
So it's, how are we going to work with you guys to put things, and the other thing that, when Margaret puts something on the list, we usually have an idea of potential funding, so somehow we have to work with the administration. So Bob tells us there's something to be done, now we have to work with Marty and Regina to figure out how we're gonna pay for that. And like the CPA for the recreation. Now, it has, in our town, we have to go through the CPA committee, and they have to make recommendations, and you have to set aside certain amounts for recreation, and we have to even find out if we can use our money over in Deerfield anyways, right?
That's correct.
Right, that's another issue.
So we have to figure out that, because we haven't talked about it. My opinion is that Frontier's part of our town, so we have an obligation to fund it. Same thing with green communities, but at the same time, we don't wanna, I mean, it's not an open,
I think the answer is simple on the green communities. To get a detailed energy audit would be crucial to move forward with any of Frontier's HVAC issues, with any of Frontier's energy issues. So I
Right.
do have a question into DOER regarding the town's use of its green communities funds to possibly help Frontier with a detailed energy audit, and that would at least get
Cover that.
things started.
Hold on, yeah.
My goal with making this list is mostly to just get it down somewhere
Right.
so that people can start thinking about it before it becomes a crisis.
yeah, and that's what we kinda say. We've been trying to get past an override, and we got, specifically for capital stabilization, because, I mean, with you do begin to have a backlog of things that need to be
Right.
maintained. We got $7 million budget, we have, well, you have to look at the Gatsby 34, look at all our assets, but I hate to think what our total assets are.
Over 300 million just in property, let alone infrastructure.
So, there's a lot, so we have to maintain that, and so, the thought is how can we integrate your needs with our revenue? That's the hard part.
And I do understand that, Tom, and I think that's one of the reasons that I was pleased to hear from mainly this committee and Margaret in terms of some other possibilities. So, that's why I think that we could reduce our original request through looking at green communities and looking at the CIP stuff as well, CPA stuff. But I do feel that there is a need at Frontier, and I would be remiss if I didn't bring it to your attention at least again. So all three of you could hear, and Bob could reiterate some of our concerns. I mean, some of these, I think, are clearly safety issues.
Well, one of the things that we do, and it doesn't end up being much, but whether it was 30%, or we take a percentage of our free cash, and we set up an agreement with the finance committee that we shift over to stabilization. Doesn't end up being a lot, but it's something. At least you can knock off a small project or something like that. But one of the things that I didn't hear addressed, though, was looking at building in or reusing an assessment again for capital. Have you explored that option?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
In other words, one of the things I didn't hear addressed, because we kind of went right back into details of equipment, was potentially restarting up a capital assessment specifically.
I don't know. I'd be happy to look into that. I've not heard of that before. And I don't know whether regional schools can do that or not. I'd have to ask. What you're saying is as a line item.
Yeah, as a line item essentially
I'd be happy to look into it.
Might be another,
I mean, it
tool we can
just
use.
seemed to me that if we could have done it, we would have, but I'm not sure that's true. So I'll look into it certainly for you. But, when we're down to 125,000 in free cash, I can't really say we're going to take a percentage of that and put it into stabilization. I mean, that won't even pay for one unexpected special education student.
Right.
And we're picked up 152,000 in special ed, because our students in grade 7 all come under one budget from the 4 elementary schools. So those costs have been spread out in 4 different budgets. Grade 7, they all come to us in Frontier. So we picked up $152,000 there for students who will never be in our schools and have never been in our schools. So it's a little bit different problem for Frontier than it is the elementaries.
Yeah, well, yeah, just like us we get unknown veterans benefits that come, and
Exactly.
it's like, you don't have a choice in paying it, you have to
Exactly.
pay, so. Lynn and Lynn, school committee members that represent Sunderland at Frontier, do you have any comments?
I guess I have a couple. One is that, you know, obviously, the safety issues are a primary concern right now. And, you know, I think all of us feel that, you know, that probably isn't something we're gonna have to worry about, but I wouldn't wanna be someone who was sitting on the committee who said, let's not do it. The other thing is that, you know, most of these items that need to be addressed, you know, aren't gonna go away or, probably even stay the same. The problems are just gonna get worse if we wait, and I doubt they're gonna get cheaper. And in addition, I don't know that, you know, sometimes we say, well, we'll wait another year because this isn't a good year to ask for money. Well, it seems like there's never a good time, you know, and so it seems like it's economically better and more cost-effective to take care of them, you know, when they're not as large of a problem. The other thing is that Bill Smith, who's been on the school committee for a gazillion years and was part of the committee working when Frontier was renovated, has reiterated to the Frontier School Committee many times that when the school was built, the towns were, you know, willing to give the money to do the renovations, but they said in, you know, unmistakable terms, you must maintain it. And, you know, so that's what we're trying to do, and that's really what the town fathers and the town citizens wanted. So I think that we would be remiss in not doing what, you know, people wanted to be done, is to take care of that asset. And from my experience being in other schools, and as I told my family yesterday and talking about coming to this meeting tonight, that I would eat off the floors at Frontier. They are so clean. I mean, I have seen other schools, and, you know, Frontier is amazingly well kept. And I think that we're very fortunate to have the people in charge of taking care of our building that we do. And seeing the kind of care that they put into our building, I feel like the things that are on this list are not anything frivolous or in any way asking for something that, you know, it doesn't need to be done.
Thank you. Lynn?
I don't have any questions, but I guess I am gratified to hear that you support Frontier as you do, that you see the need for these improvements that we have to be doing, that you understand why we have prioritized this list as we have. So I'm grateful to hear that you support that and you understand it and you're working for solutions, as we all are. We understand that, like Lynn said, there's no easy time, no good time to ask for money, but it's important that we all work together toward this. We're not gonna get anywhere if we don't work together. So I'm gratified to hear that.
Thank you, Lynn. Okay, where do you wanna go now?
It's in your hands.
Well, we have to look and find $35,000. I would agree with Lynn. That's easy, Lynn and Lynn. Why am I saying
There's
that?
different spellings then.
I know, pronounce
That
the
just
same though.
confused them now.
But when, and I think that's one of the things that the board said at our last meeting, is that we would support the, security and safety issues.
Security and safety.
Without question. I guess is how those are defined.
Mhm.
I do have one question on that. Would that also include the van, the 15-passenger van?
That's what we would talk about, yeah. 'Cause
Because I really feel like, you know, students breaking down in Holyoke is just really not safe. And the other thing is, or breaking down anywhere, but the other thing is that, you know, if we cannot use that 15-passenger van, do we have to call Mr. Gripko and say we need a bus? I mean, I don't think that it's cost effective to not have the use of that.
Well, that's what we have to talk to school administration about, you know. We have to figure out what we have available for funds. I don't know if we're gonna scrape the 35,000.
Can I just mention that on that capital, we have just kind of an outline out there, up there by funding source of all the capital requests for this year that the board went over last week. And on there is the Frontier Track and Tennis Court still. Is that being removed for now?
Well,
Understanding that there's gonna be a discussion,
I have a very interesting dilemma, because I'm acting on behalf of the board without the board approval, which I'm willing to do.
Sure.
It's my job, I think. And what I'm saying is that we could remove Article 2, because I think we're going to get the tennis courts done through Deerfield. We've certainly been led to believe that. And the track, if we reclassify it as recreational, which it is, then it could be eligible for the CPA funds next year.
Right.
And we basically have one more year, in talking with Bob, who had the track people come and look at this. We have one more year that we can handle the same resurfacing we've got now and not affect the infrastructure. But we can't go beyond that 1 year. So I would say we take that second article off. I'm much more concerned, and I think the school committee members are much more concerned with the items we presented tonight, which we consider to be safety and security indicators, and which Bob spoke to as well. So that's why I prepared this second sheet for you this evening.
Thank you.
Because I did take those things off, and I took off the HVAC as well, which I'm happy to pursue through Green Communities any way I can do that. So that does leave that amount of $35,000, and I think I'm doing this based on what Tom is saying, that we are all in a bind together. We all are trying to work collaboratively together, and if we reduce the amount, then maybe we can make some headway with the towns. I have talked with the other towns as well. I think there's at least some interest in collaboration and cooperation in at least 3 and possibly 4 of the towns.
Are there any other green communities besides Sunderland right now?
All
Yes.
4
All
towns
four?
are green
Okay, so then
communities.
I should think that we'd be able to utilize through all 4 of the towns.
Well, each of
One
the town
aspect.
has their own committee,
Right.
and each
Right.
town has to give approval or not. But at least it meets the requirements of the state under recreational.
And I
Right.
think that's where that audit helps to give us a
audit will be-
baseline so that
You
we've got
have to
that.
do, right, you have to do the, au- they have to do the
have to do
audit,
the
Right.
audit.
and then you have to show how it's gonna save.
Exactly, and then Green Communities would actually decide which projects are attractive enough to be funded by
Right.
Green Communities. So,
Right.
great way to prioritize.
And I,
Right.
And
But-
again, that's one method. Another is
Well,
private partnerships with
that's-
utilities.
Well,
and I
right,
have to
there's
think
two-
you could,
have two you have three, right, you have two
Correct.
options.
I
Well,
think you can
actually,
get
three.
traction with the combination of all that somehow.
So I think, and again, I think that's where we could probably work with you guys a lot closer, just because we've been having to do it for the last couple of years.
Right.
We don't have no money either, so we have to be creative.
Well, Bob was instrumental in an ESCO project at the elementary school.
Right.
But, you know,
Bob's
as
got
a,
his hands in everything, doesn't
I,
he?
as a representative of Unit 38 and Frontier, he was instrumental in, you know, the execution and design of our project, so.
So if you could, allow us some time to figure out where we get $35,000.
Okay. Fair enough. We appreciate it, Tom, and we appreciate the ability to come back this evening and talk with all of you.
Appreciate that.
And I think we're doing our best in order to reduce the cost to the towns and still keep in mind that we have students and employees that we're responsible for and care and concern about their safety and welfare. So it is an eye-opener. We sent you information for the next 5 years, which is subject to change,
Right.
but at least you have an eye as to the direction we're going in.
It's interesting to compare those schedules as we've gone through multiple years of budget process, look at those schedules, and you go out 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years, and you go, it's only $7 or $8 million bucks. But that's the reality of it in capital planning.
Right.
That's just the reality of it.
David?
Well, I think Lynn kind of hit on one thing too. We need
Which
to
one?
work, the second Lynn in the back, Lynn Roberts. We need to do a little better job of working together, and I would hope that the past history, fiscal history of the last, say, 7 years of various communities will make us think a little bit more about working better together. And also, we kind of need to do that because we're going to need to think clearly outside of the box. I hate to use that phrase because it's so overused, but we really need to think a little bit differently, like with the green communities, the CPC stuff, than we have been thinking in the past about getting stuff funded, because
Well, in particular, if you have Green Community Fund, you're not gonna want it all to go,
or
One
to any,
place.
exactly, right. So you have to figure out with each of the communities how to parcel it out
Correct.
and work. And that's where more cooperation, quite frankly, than we have now, is gonna come into play.
And we're more than willing to cooperate, but we don't have the access to either of those funding sources or really know
That's
the
right.
criteria behind them.
That's why we've got
Then
to,
it's the coordination of 4 towns. So we're more than willing to work with you in any way that you help us to understand how to do that.
Yeah.
And I volunteer Marty to be.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm listening to all
anytime
of this.
after July, right?
We're more than willing.
they didn't tell you you're working the 3rd shift, did they?
No, no, no.
I wanted to save some surprises for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Surprise.
Open this drawer
So
behind
just
you.
follow Regina around for a moment.
So thank you very much. We
We'll
appreciate
look
your
at the-
consideration.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Regina and Bob, for showing up tonight.
Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Lisa, and Judy, for coming also.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. So, Margaret, can you put that on for discussion? Okay, discuss that later. And see if you get Margaret, see if you can find a funding source after talking to the other towns. Okay. Okay, next up, Margaret. FY14 budget.
FY14 budget, there's really no major updates. The only thing that was changed on the budget sheet, I've got it here, so hold on, I just have to save this otherwise.
There's no mystery funding sources found.
I haven't found any, I'll have to work on that. No, the only thing that's changed since last week is that the elected assessors, Board of Assessors salary is changed pursuant to their request for the 2% increase as elected officials. So you'll see right here that the Board of Assessors salary goes up 2%, $165. Article 2 also reflects that.
Almost more to run the assessing department than the selectmen's office, huh?
I was gonna, well,
Getting there.
Okay.
Okay, Kathy, it's my turn to ask.
So
Could you turn
that's
the
it
lights back
for the
on,
budget
please?
update. I'm working on the use of cash
Thank you.
sheet. The town meeting budget, Bob,
you.
you'd be familiar with this. The town meeting budget, it'll be presented just the way it was last year in those budget segments. And the revenue sheet format has not changed either.
I thought
The excess revenues as of today, $33,417.
didn't we say that Bob had to sing the budget this year, though? Wasn't that one of the changes?
You have to sing the budget?
I thought I heard that.
What's that?
We've shortened it down, so we don't have all the line items, but you have to sing each of
You
the
have to sing-
categories, so.
Oh. Here, there's the budget. There you go.
All right, so no major changes?
No major changes
Do you-
last week.
Have you reflected the finance committee, the library changes?
No, the board asked to have that come back to them this week. So you do have the revised,
See that there?
you do have the revised budget request before you. This is where they want to reduce their building operating line by $1,670 and increase their library expense line by an additional $1,670 over the $2,000 the board.
So the year-to-date for expended on the budget library is $10,877 out of budgeted 30,000?
Under building
So they're at
operations.
36%. And we're probably 2/3 through the year, right? First line, library operations.
That's
Un-
not accurate. I don't believe that's
Under-
accurate as of the date of this submission. This might be the number as of the date of their original submission
That makes
in
sense.
December.
That makes sense. They said they've been passing back 2,500.
In fact,
Right, Each year. and they wanted to
$2,500 to $4,000 each year.
Yeah.
I
They
see-
do
I see where that
have
would
in the
jump out,
past-
Tom. If
yeah.
it only, if they're less than half spent, we're 75% through, something's really
Yeah.
wrong.
Their library building operating in, oh, that's the newest, wait a second.
The big
Well,
green
how,
thing.
how do you, how do you,
December 7th, their percent expended was 36
how do
point.
you,
Got it.
how do you, how do you, how do you, footnote this? So when it comes back in 3 years that there's not enough money in the operations, you would say,
Right.
well,
Right, this
How do
was
you
the
do that?
decision.
Well, first, it's gotta reflect the real date. The numbers that are here aren't this date. First and foremost, this is reflective of December, as was just said.
The percent expended is
So,
reflected.
I
as
agree
of
with
December.
that. So
Right.
at time the decision's made, we should have the one that's the real date
right.
and the real percentage.
Contractual
And
And
then
then
numbers.
look at the
And
project.
then, exactly, projected for,
Well,
and at
it
the same
looks like
time.
you expended in 2012, 24,933.
Right, so that is in their wheelhouse.
And so, but then I have to say,
Mhm.
was the lighting upgrades over at the library?
They did not have lighting upgrades.
Bits and pieces.
At-
but
Oh, I'm
not-
sorry,
Not part
by,
of the ESCO.
not part of the ESCO and not part of the Green Communities projects,
Correct.
correct?
They have not yet.
No, they have not. They are gonna be part of the detailed energy audit.
That's true.
Yeah, so we'll see, might see something there.
Okay.
They've had bits and pieces through donations.
Mm,
All right,
okay.
so really nothing has changed with the budget?
Nothing
Mr. Bob, you
as
have any
of-
questions about the budget?
I haven't seen the budget, so.
Where the heck have you been?
Planning Ireland.
Margaret, can we make sure the moderator has
Copy
a
of the
budget?
Hold on, do I have a copy right here?
Wait a second, I may have a budget
Here.
for him.
There you go. Is that the level?
If
no,
that's
wait.
last week's,
It's outdated.
by $165.
Is that one still good?
Oh, no,
That's
that's not it,
Fire
no.
EMS.
Bob, I'll email it, I'll
Okay.
email you the update, okay?
Thank you.
All right, all right, capital, I guess we reviewed capital, is there anything else you'd like to talk about capital, Mr. Bertrand?
Well, a couple of things, if I could, Mr. Chair, under the capital.
Margaret, can you go to the capital?
Yes.
We've talked in the past about, it's all right,
Oh, my
Microsoft wants
goodness.
to help for some reason.
Oh, there we go.
So we have a couple of pieces in front of us under capital, under the format. Left-hand column, by department, top, series of, rows by department, and then top columns by funding source. And one of the discussion points over the last couple of years is how can we make our budget and operating budget and our capital budget similar, both in texture and in format. So we had one format a couple of weeks ago, we're trying to do this again, and I would like to entertain some discussion and entice the board to discuss voting capital budget versus individual warrant articles. We would have funding sources that are not unlike an operating budget,
Yep.
and then vote the handout accordingly with their matching funding sources. Still the same amount of discussion, line by line, like we do in the operating budget, but instead of several capital articles, vote a capital budget.
One article for the whole.
That kind of format cleaned up. Now, we have funding sources that we see across the top that obviously town meeting would appropriate from, but it wouldn't necessarily appropriate all of them, case in point.
CPA would be
CPA money, well, actually, it's still an appropriation of town meeting, but still, there may be funding sources in the future that you could expend capital monies on.
Yep.
So the refined values, and this is a draft essentially, we talked about some projects earlier, that may not be on the final budget sent to town meeting, but I would encourage some discussion about, do we vote a capital budget separate than an operating budget? The answer should be yes. What format do we use? Do we use individual warrant articles, or do we use a spreadsheet handout and then a motion citing all the sources?
I'm open to discussing anything, and anything especially that allows us to achieve the same goals more efficiently.
And
So-
still have the same,
Right, 'cause
same
you've still gotta talk
transparency.
about
It's
everything.
really important to have the
Right.
same transparency. This is no way, shape, or form to usurp town meeting's authority. On the contrary.
Right, I think it,
However, we already vote a budget. Let's vote another one.
The moderator and I went over this today in an initial review of the draft annual town meeting warrant. So I had just drafted an article for, a capital budget article. So
Okay.
you'll see in a moment, when you take a look at the draft warrant, you'll see what an article could look like for the capital budget,
Okay,
for the warrant.
well, right now, can we go back to
The items?
actual sheet.
the item?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Can you put that on the first thing to do, July 1?
Yeah.
Discuss how you want to do the capital plan,
Yeah.
okay? So by September, we'll have it
And
in
we're all
order.
set?
Right.
Discussing format right now, probably counterproductive. We're bound to get someone screwed up, probably me. And we hate to get the moderator confused.
Well,
All righty.
Anyway,
I hear you.
all right,
Let's put on our waders and dive in.
yeah. Well,
There may
Yeah.
be a broader discussion, after
It-
town meeting about the capital plan.
but if you're gonna do that, are you gonna form a capital planning group and get
Capital committee.
together?
To be discussed, yeah, I
Right.
think,
And then you have a capital planning group.
yeah.
That could be a subcommittee of the finance committee and the select board and the permanent building that would discuss on capital.
Right.
Absolutely. Okay. But now, what do we have on the capital plan for this year so far? The replacement of the cruiser is on hold, right?
It was asked to be held last week, yeah.
Scott?
I don't think we can afford it. And
David?
it's outside of our
I
cycles.
would agree.
I would say
Alright.
not even to include it, let alone hold it.
All right. The highway replacement truck, Scott, you were gonna come back this week, you said you would talk to George,
And I don't see any reason we can't move this forward.
okay? So take that off from hold,
I would say take it off of hold and include it in the capital plan.
okay. The next one that's up that we have to look at is the
Salt
Margaret,
shed.
on the parking, on the parking lot fence for the repair replacement. Did you see my note today?
I did, and I found it, thank goodness for historical knowledge.
The-
In '02, there's a stipulation in the zoning special permit
Right.
that requires a fence or dense shrubbery for 139 feet.
That's just part of the,
Well, I didn't think we'd put up a fence if we didn't have to.
Right, because
Yeah. It's there, and I sent an email off to the finance committee, and that should answer their questions
Right.
definitively.
So the parking lot fence is required.
That's, a fence or shrubbery is required.
shrubbery. Would
Doesn't
shrubbery
say
be
how
any
big
better?
the shrubbery has to be.
A little small.
I have put a request to the STC about the elementary school wireless. I understand the STC may be meeting this Thursday
Okay,
and may be able to bring a recommendation to the board next week.
okay. So Frontier Capital Plan, right now, you got 48,213.
In the paper copy, and I just changed it up on the board to $35,058.08 per the submission tonight. And I removed the tennis courts and track.
Yeah,
So right now, having removed the cruiser, the total requested is a little over $150,000 under capital stabilization, with a deficit in the closing balance of $22,000, a little over $22,000.
so where do we have the money in the capital stabilization from? That's the money left over from,
$10,000 left from last year, plus the 30% from free
Of the
cash
free
this
cash.
year, yes.
okay. So if we had to, we could take the Frontier out of our stabilization.
You could use stabilization. In fact, I did plug in an article to transfer money to stabilization in case stabilization is considered as a funding source for capital or anything else.
I guess we'd use the argument that
It's capital.
but I mean, how do you not pay for security,
Mhm.
right?
Right, of all the things on that list, that's the least
Securities.
arguable one.
But I do, you know, I would ask, I guess, when they talk about, they took out the HVAC, so they're really, the only things that stand out to me are the van and the pickup.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't replace both of them in the same year, because all of a sudden you're gonna always be replacing the
That's
van and
true,
the
they're
pickup in the same year.
Replacement,
Those
yeah.
definitely need to be staggered, and I personally, I would think that they'd probably get more use out of the van than the pickup.
I've ridden in that van. I just have to say, I've ridden in that van. When we did the solar site visits,
Yep, oh.
we borrowed that van.
And how was that?
I got to ride in the front passenger seat. It was interesting. It did not break down, I have to say. It was.
Well, the breakdown that they mentioned with 100,000 thing, it's a fuel pump, I've
Yeah.
had fuel pumps replaced around 100,000, that's a logical thing to expect.
Yeah.
Is there any stipulation, though, that since we're all green communities now, doesn't that have to be a more fuel-efficient vehicle? Just off the top of my head, I'm thinking,
That wasn't part of the green communities.
Not for Sunderland, because that's Sunderland's policy on the fuel-efficient vehicle policy, but that brings up a really interesting question.
I would strongly recommend, just personally, that maybe diesel be looked at. A diesel vehicle for, for fuel efficiency and also overall maintenance costs. While the vehicle may be a little more expensive to buy up front, your operating costs are generally lower.
Why are they lower or are they higher?
I think-
Because you're using more
well-
oil. Scott, what on your,
Uh,
your diesel truck?
It depends on the GVW, the class, and the type of use. There is a tipping point where
It goes over.
becomes more efficient.
I'd have to look at it, but I think it's just bears worth looking at rather than just running out and grabbing a gas one.
All right.
Because I assume they gotta replace this another 15 passenger, right?
So Margaret, can you put the Frontier revised numbers in so we can see what it looks like next week?
I will do that, yeah.
Please.
And I can break them down by category that they show in their article as well, so you could see the safety and security. You know, you could see how much Sunderland's portion would be on each of.
You have a question, Mr. Moderator?
Yeah.
You look like you're deep in thought.
I like the format that Margaret came up with and that she and I discussed this afternoon for putting it up there and voting on it. The only problem we're gonna run into is that if you come up with a mixed source of funding,
Right, some are
Then you-
two-thirds.
2/3,
Oh, because of the votes.
Right.
Parliamentary issues.
Well, and the only one is if you stabilization.
destabilization,
Right.
But CPA was 2/3.
or if you're gonna vote to
CPA?
borrow money.
Okay.
No.
That's true.
But, it's interesting though, because when you talk about CPA, I mean, CPA committees may not believe that Frontier is part of the
Sure.
town.
Well, and don't we still really need a legal precedent for that? Because there hasn't actually been a really meaty legal
Regarding the article?
thing set, in terms of whether, a given,
Well, Deerfield says they're gonna do the Deerfield said they're gonna do the tennis courts because they utilize the tennis courts for their rec programs.
yes.
More than the
Yeah.
other towns.
So, and not that, anybody from the towns can use it.
Yeah.
I think they may have trouble with the track, because I think they got the track locked. Isn't
Do
the
they?
track
We
locked?
do, it's fenced.
Oh, the fence,
It's
that's right.
fenced.
And so I don't think they allow people to walk on it, do they?
That's a
Unless
question
you
for
wanna
Frontier.
Up the fence.
So CPA, so, like
needs
the
to be
UMass,
public
like the UMass track, you as
Yes.
an individual can go walk on it except between 2 and 5 when they have track practice, but
Yeah.
you could walk on it.
And there are some private schools in Deerfield that leave their tracks open for the
Yes, right.
I
public
don't
to
know.
use.
Well,
I
maybe
don't know,
There are some private schools
that's
that,
something we can discuss.
huh?
Maybe it's just a matter of changing the policy on that.
Well, but they would have to change the policy to do
Right.
that, so,
yeah.
alright. So Scott, what do you think?
With respect to what, Mr. Chair?
Matt, do you wanna leave it where it is right now, changes?
With respect to the capital request from Frontier,
Yeah,
I have a pretty strong opinion that I'm happy to support the security request of 67,500, but not the rest of it.
Sunderland's portion on the safety and security portion would
So
be,
you're-
sorry.
So you're saying to total of 57,000, but not the 2 vehicles?
I'm suggesting 67,500 is what is under the summary for, security and safety requirements. I don't see 5750 for electrical improvement being a really,
That's not,
item.
that's not a request right now.
it's in this article that was drafted to us tonight.
I thought they said they were gonna take that out.
They took 50,000 of it out. They kept the electrical in, but took out the HVAC.
Correct.
They
This
took
is-
50,000 out.
This was
but-
handed to us today.
All right.
Anyway, the way I see it, Mr. Chair, the short answer is, I'm happy to go on record as supporting the request for safety and security updates to the tune of $67,500. I question both the timing of the delivery as well as, I question the timing of the delivery and the need to capture the other 2 items under safety and security.
Okay. So Margaret, we'll discuss that next week, okay?
Next week,
How's
yes.
Fine?
That way gives us, if you have any questions, we can
Yeah,
address them
totally.
to,
Totally.
Frontier. It gives
Absolutely.
us an opportunity.
I think it's important to have the give and take they presented tonight. If you ask my opinion straight up, there's my initial opinion.
Okay, that's fine.
So you're saying keep the HVAC in?
Now, there's some elements inside there, Bob, that were camera, fire, security system upgrade, lock sets, that kind of stuff. That makes perfect sense. And that has a total of about 67,000. And we're gonna, I think we'll, over the next week, we'll contact the administration and get it reformatted. The HVAC, as I said, electrical upgrades, there's other partners for that. And, you know, it's a whole lot easier to come to the appropriating body, in their Frontier's case, for towns, if you can have the savings demonstrated, what the payback on the investment is going to be with respect to the energy efficiency upgrades. Is it all gonna be by the town? We did our ESCO with very little town money. We incorporated some debt, but we're using the savings for that guaranteed performance to pay that debt. So there was an initial appropriation, but there hasn't been since.
An energy performance contract.
So,
See, why wouldn't we do that?
what I'd recommend, Margaret, is that can you contact Frontier and tell them that right now, our gut feel
Right.
is that the electrical upgrade should all be able to be taken care of under an ESCO,
Okay.
okay? And
I
that
can
we're
give them samples of the ESCO agreement and everything
And that way, and you're right, Scott, all of those are some that we've done in the elementary school.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Bob's participated and mightily. He's been instrumental in making sure that they're vetted projects.
All right, so let's see what they have to say and
Right.
get a comment from them on that, would you please?
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, no, I agree, yeah. I
Okay.
mean, and plus, he's got the experience having done
Absolutely.
that, which is fantastic for it, so.
Does that make sense, Mr. Doobie?
Makes sense to me.
I mean, we're asking them not to do anything different than what we do.
Correct.
And I can give them the documents that they need to get them started on moving forward with a performance contract.
Sure.
And I'm sure the COG would be willing to help. They were,
Well, didn't Franklin County Tech do it?
They did
The tech
some of-
school
they
did do it.
Some of the work,
They,
yep.
they did an ESCO.
yes, they did. Yeah, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So effectively, what that would do, Mr. Chair, is take Frontier's capital plan. I would suggest that instead of the 2 items in front of us, one already withdrawn tonight.
Yep.
That our second is our percentage of 67 and change.
All right, Margaret, let them know that that's what we're thinking of right now,
I will,
okay?
yes. And I'll put numbers together for you next week.
All right, okay? Special town meeting warrant review.
Oh, and it's a doozy. 2, maybe 3 articles. Okay, and they are the first 2 are the routine articles that the board generally sees on the special town meeting warrant. The first is unpaid bills of prior fiscal years. You do have those invoices or spreadsheets explaining the invoices attached to your sheet. The big chunk there is to Patriot Properties, and that was an oversight on payment of the invoice to Patriot last year, and that was for the computer. That was for the
stuff.
software, yeah. The other piece, the other bigger piece, would be to Bear River Landscaping, which was our mowing contract, and the invoice was received after the end of the fiscal year. So it's a prior year invoice.
Can't they receive invoices up to like the 15th of July?
You can, and this was too late.
So,
You can receive
well,
it.
can I just make a suggestion, and then all future contracts that we put in there, all, by the end of the fiscal year, any bill received any invoice after July
On to the
15th
next.
won't be accepted?
That's right, we're doing it. We are doing it. This is not only that, some bidders could be disqualified as non-responsive bidders if they can't agree to that. It's just gonna be the way it is.
Okay.
Because it's not for lack of contacting them, I can tell you that.
So, do you wanna vote on these tonight, Mr. Bergeron, Mr.
Yeah.
Pierce? There's no
Yeah,
reason to
sure.
put this
Right.
off, I mean,
No,
this
on
is
the
just,
contrary, let's do it.
especially on the special.
Right.
Okay, so I'll accept the motion. You,
Move to recommend Article 1 as written.
Second.
motion made and second, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
3-0, Margaret.
Okay.
Next article? Yes?
Snow and ice.
Question on the Patriot properties. Those are the tickets for the select board to the Patriots?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
Set it in front of the press.
Nice.
Yeah, right.
All right, make it $6,200 so we can include the moderator.
Yeah.
And this was during a crisis year too, Mr. Moderator. Wait till a good year.
All right.
Okay.
Item 2 is snow and ice wages.
Yeah, I have
And
not plugged in the numbers yet, but I shouldn't say anything, but,
Let's just skip it right now.
okay, because we don't want any.
And what's the third
Snow.
question?
No. The third one is.
The third one, actually, I have it in strike-through, because I did want to, I know that we mentioned this, we discussed it briefly last week, the Water District Agency Fund. There is an explanation that I've asked the accountant for, it's attached to your packet, it's the last
Yeah.
page.
I saw that email.
And it is an internal accounting function. The town does not owe the water district any more money. This is similar to those accounting fund balances that have had to be zeroed out in prior years. The COPS Fast Grant, the Quinn Bill Fund, the Highway Chapter 90 Fund. This is an internal accounting function. The town took in money, this is years ago, prior to the COG beginning the accounting in town.
So,
The money was put into the general fund rather than the district agency fund.
Okay.
Now, the reason it's struck out on the warrant article is because the option for the board would be to raise it on the recap. There's excess levy capacity now, and it could be raised on the recap, similar to the Sugar Bush legal fees last year.
Yeah, we'll just do this, when you're ready, put it on, the right number. Did you wanna do it, the recap sheet?
well, I think that's a discussion we should have. What's the mechanism we want to use?
Yeah,
You
it's
want
the
to
mechanism that, yeah, it's really the board's prerogative as to whether you bring this to town meeting for funding, which would be from free cash, or you raise it on the recap, which would affect next year's free cash. It's one or the other.
Now we're later.
There's no reason to, is there, Scott?
In my mind, this is money that has been neither appropriated nor expended.
No, it has been
Well, I
appropriated.
understand what you're saying.
Oh, well, actually, it hasn't been appropriated because it's been raised, it hasn't been passed through.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Correct.
So why does it go to the town meeting for?
Correct. And we've had this discussion in the past, well, where'd the money come from that we're paying this bill for that we already paid for? It's like, no, it's not going that way.
And in recent years, the town didn't have excess levy capacity to raise those
Great point.
funds, yeah, on the,
Just do it through the recap
Okay.
process,
okay.
I
Yeah.
think. Scott?
I think that's the most clear way to go about it. You understand what happened, Bob?
She explained it to me at the special.
So if you bring it forward to town meeting, it already happened once.
Right, you're
And
doing it again.
Town meeting had nothing to do with it the first time,
Mhm.
and so, anyway.
If anybody has any questions about it, they can give me a call, they can talk with Herb. The accountant is hard to get a hold of, but we can explain.
Okay.
Okay. That would leave really 2 warrant articles. That would be snow and ice deficit, 2 with the numbers plugged in, and then the first one, which we've just moved to recommend.
Yep. All right, so on the
Annual?
annual, you just wanna look at this,
One quick question or
Okay.
comment. One of the recent moderators' meetings, discussion was brought up about having a special town meeting like this. And what they're saying is you don't need one. These 2 articles could be part of the annual town meeting
well,
because it's
what
being
we were
held.
described to us by our town council, it says that you can't mix fiscal years.
Right.
Not mixing fiscal years because the town meeting is still held in this fiscal year. So therefore, it's the same year, and there's no sense in having two meetings. We're not
We can
mixing
get
two
clarification
budgets.
from council for next year. I know historically, there's been the special town meeting
Right, I know
immediately preceding.
historically, and what their
Well,
argument is, it
historically,
just
the
makes
last
for
5 or 6
smoother.
years.
Pardon?
It historically has only been like the last 7
Isn't
or
it
8
the same
years. It
point?
hasn't been forever.
The appropriation is funds
I
in
think it
the
goes back
current
to
year.
Dana time, Dana Kennan
You could
time.
apply in the
And
current year.
because I remember when I first started as a selectman, we just had one. We took care of all these together, so.
Yeah.
And then during Dana's time, there was a memo from Copeland and Page is that you had to have,
But the moderator's meeting is saying,
okay.
do it.
We can investigate
I don't know
further if
what's
the board
right.
would like.
Next year we may, well, so, but what happens are the things that we take care of at town meeting that take effect, we need to
Next
take
fiscal.
effect right away.
Well, it's just having that conversation, Mr. Chair. You gotta have something that,
Huh? Well, let's say like last year, wasn't there something that let's say we wanted to buy a police cruiser now.
you can only do it with.
If you don't
can't
specify the
spend the money
year
until
in
next
which
year.
you want to appropriate.
What's that?
You couldn't spend the money until next year.
But what if we wanted to use this year, we had available funds this year?
Well, you put it in for this year. Just say when you're gonna spend it.
We have to-
Maybe,
yeah, we have to
well,
look into
we can look at that.
Do some homework, though. It's an
Yeah.
interesting idea.
Sure. But I know that's how we used to do it. It changed, I think it changed it during Dana Kenna, when he was a town administrator. I think we started doing that. Annual warrant, this is, as it stands now, this is complete.
Oh, this is a draft. This is still very much a draft. The board has already, it's complete except for, there's one article that I'm still trying to.
I've never heard you so indecisive in my
I
entire
know.
life.
No. All right,
Margaret,
so
you're
what,
very decisive.
okay, what you have in front of you is a draft annual town meeting warrant. The board's copies have comments, my comments attached. On pages, the first page, front and back, the board has already taken action to include those articles. The next page, on the front of the page, you'll see a capital budget format. I actually have this on the computer. I could put it up on the screen.
So, all right, put it up there next week. Or you got it on the computer? You got it?
I have it.
Okay, good.
Yeah, this is what you were talking about, the new.
This is the capital
Right.
budget idea. Yeah, well, hold on.
Microsoft wants to help.
I know.
Yeah.
All
that's-
right, I'm gonna say no.
That's what I'm afraid of.
There we go. Okay, so,
Quiet eye man.
annual town meeting, here it is. Here it is, watch it be all marked up.
It'd be easy to read. It'd be like hieroglyphs in the caves
Yep.
of France.
Still
All right.
NASCO budget.
So here we go. Capital budget article. Let me zoom in a little bit. Okay,
Much better.
all right. So I'm gonna, this is something I took a sample from the town of Lexington, actually, that presents a capital budget. There are several towns that present capital budget warrant articles. This happens to be from Lexington. I liked the format better than some other towns. And basically, it allows you to just list the articles.
List the items in the article.
I'm sorry, list the projects within the article. This would be the prerogative of the moderator as to whether each one is presented separately, like as a whole or otherwise, like what used to be done with the town meeting, the operating budget.
And the alternative to this is each of the capitals come in and as an individual warrant request.
The alternative to this is an
Individual
individual article.
Right.
So.
The effect is the same.
What you would have to do is that capital stabilization would have to be, if you had something in the stabilization, see, if we have a true capital stabilization, it
It'd
has
be
to be
still
two.
one vote.
That's right.
1/2 vote.
That's right, and in fact, if there's any capital stabilization funding mixed in with this article, in addition to other funding sources, free cash or otherwise, it's all gonna be a 2/3 vote, yes.
Just make the whole
So-
thing a 2/3 vote.
I know.
So
you-
you'd have to take your 2/3 purchases out and list them separately.
That's right.
Sure.
Scott's comments earlier on this were that, it increases the transparency, because you've got all of these capital budgets all in one place. It's not like
Right,
you
you don't have to
vote
read
on
through.
one here, and skip 2 or 3, and
Yeah,
this way, people have got the
the list, right?
right there.
I don't know if it's more transparent, I mean. 'cause
It's different,
It's
it's
the
differently
formats.
formatted, it's more
differently.
concise.
That, you've always been transparent, it's just that it's gonna be easier for everyone
Well,
to see it.
That's what I'm thinking of. If it makes the whole process more efficient so that people are a little more fresh of mind as they approach the middle of the process and not, you know, because we've all been there, and, you know, if it keeps people a little more perky through the whole process, hey.
So,
But
if you, did you wanna try it this year?
I would.
yeah, could try it. I got a question though. Do you put, now you've got the item, right? So here's your bulleted list, right? Do you go and you just read through the list and say, okay, here's the things we have, and then ask, like, you know, do we wanna put a hold on the dump truck? Is that kinda how we do it mechanically?
Treat it just like the operating budget.
Right, so.
Well, you have to specify funding. There's a
Yeah,
lot of
for each
different
item.
fund uses.
Yes.
They have to have a little chart,
Well,
like
Oh, you
item.
put your
Alright,
chart up.
Put it on, put
The
a
chart?
sample article
Put the
up
chart.
next week for next week's discussion.
What up there?
The sample article.
Oh, a sample article?
Put up a sample article.
Can't hurt to try it, right? See if it.
We can always look at it and say, we don't wanna do it this year.
Actually, this article,
After we
believe
see
it or
it.
not, in future years, and some towns do this, I think Lexington actually does, Arlington does, I know a lot of the bigger towns do. They actually incorporate their debt service into this article, because any debt service related to capital projects. So it's taken out of the operating budget and put right into the capital budget
interesting.
article. So the capital budget article pays for the borrowing.
Yeah, and Arlington also puts 5% of their budget into capital expenditures every year too.
Minor
when they-
detail.
Even-
I'm just saying what others do, that's
Detail
all.
is
I
detail.
just, I think it's an interesting approach, given that most of the debt, all the debt, is related to capital projects in one way or another.
That, I guess, partway there.
Interesting.
Alright, so put that in,
Sample capital budget for next week,
Sample article. Yep.
sample article.
article.
In the chart that Margaret had up there, in terms of all of these capital things with the funding, should be a handout.
Oh, and so say, in accordance or per the town meeting handout.
And, you know, they can see all of the capital
The details.
expenditures in one place and the funding source. I think
Right.
Margaret's done her homework on that one.
I only seem a little mixed up right now, no?
Right, I
Okay.
like it, right, 'cause you get
Tom
the
is
items
having,
and then-
Tom has reached the age where he's having a difficult time with change.
Oh, no.
I actually know, and I relish doing it, if you can do it in a simpler format, just like we did the budget a couple of years ago.
Right.
It's, the thing is though, is that typically capital for us, capital expenditures isn't like Arlington or Lexington that have a
No.
part of their,
Yeah.
they have a line item of $200,000 or $300,000 or $400,000 and they just appropriate, and that's much easier.
You mean it would be easier to have a
Right.
stable
Right, the
capital?
capital
funding
projects are-
mechanism?
And you still have to convince people that they, and again, I'm just doing from my experiences, you still have to be able, people, for whatever it's worth, we don't discuss 70% of the budget. Matter of fact, we probably don't discuss 90% of the budget. But if you wanna buy a police cruiser, you better talk about that police cruiser. And
To that end, if this is formatted correctly and the handout is formatted correctly, that discussion can ensue with the same amount of ease.
we shall see. We shall see.
Wow. It looks like there might be seven items listed under this from from various funding sources.
Guess it's one of those things, there's only one way to find out.
Okay, so that's the first.
We made a-
Listen
hey,
that, Mr.
We made a budget.
Moderator, I'll just say, I
Hey.
told the selectmen not to do it.
The next two articles that
Pretty soon
are,
you're gonna look like Paige, the inside of Paige, you know.
Wasn't my idea, hey?
All right, Margaret, what else we got?
all right, the next two articles are the Frontier Capital articles. I'm gonna remove the first one entirely based on the discussion tonight. And then the second one is gonna be restructured.
Now, can I go back to the
It has to be
discussion
small.
about the articles about Frontier?
Mm.
If they have to be placed on the warrant?
As separate articles.
No, just if they
Do they
have to be
need to?
placed on.
Oh, yeah.
What did you learn from town council?
That I don't have an opinion in writing, but I understand that it's not required for the board. The Board of Selectmen is not obligated to place the capital articles on.
Correct.
As part of the MGL
I
or the
am waiting,
agreement.
I'm waiting for the written opinion, but that's what my understanding is at this point.
Correct. Okay. Mr. Moderator, what do you think?
I don't know what the law is.
I was like, you may have opinion on most things, so.
I would hope that. I look at it, we're gonna pay for it one way or the other.
Well, yeah.
And from my perspective, seeing what happens when you don't maintain things, it's a heck of a lot cheaper to maintain them than it is to wait.
But the essence of the conversation may be lost, but the essence of the conversation is that there has to be communication between we've asked for many years that the town administrators meet with the superintendent on a regular basis, 4 times a year. Pick a number.
I had meetings
To
here.
discuss that, okay? And so that they could sit down and they could discuss things that come up over the course of the year. For no other reason that if we had known about these capital expenditures, we may have been able to offer advice such as green communities grants, community preservation, like Scott just said, the ESCO. We could have worked with them to try to find funding sources. So the only thing we have asked over the years is to be a partner, be a partner, and understand that a budget, there's 2 parts of budget, there's revenue and there's expenditures. And you can't just work the expenditures part, you do have to think about the revenue. So I think that's the essence of what our conversation's been, is that we just, I really think a Frontier, like our elementary school, is part of our community. We spend a lot of money every year over Frontier. Interesting note, Margaret pulled something out of the original agreement the other day.
Oh, was that the?
I don't know when Margaret gets to,
I don't know how that number
I
stuck
don't
in
know
my
when Margaret has all the
Just
free.
did.
We're gonna talk how she has all this free time to go looking back in the 1953 agreements,
I have it right here,
but,
Oh, you have it?
if I can.
but
pull it up.
I saved that.
in 1953, the Frontier School enrollment was what? Do you know by chance how much it was?
If you give me
Probably
a
around
moment.
1,100,
492 students
492.
from the four founding towns. You know what the budget was?
A little smaller than ours.
$115,000 or $119,000. I can't remember, the 115 or 119. It was right in that. It was less than $120,000.
Yeah, the cost per pupil was, I can't remember.
It's a good thing you're sitting down, hold on. $238 estimated cost per pupil.
Per pupil. You know how many students are in Frontier from the 4 towns today? You've heard this number before.
It's only around 600, right?
492.
No.
Yeah.
You know what the Frontier budget is today?
$12 million.
Yeah, but look at it this way.
Now, a lot of that has to do with
About $12 million.
mandates. Much of it has to.
And the total student enrollment is about 2,767 now versus 487 for the whole district.
The enrollment was the thing that surprised me most, really.
Not the
It does.
same. It's
60 years.
I was gonna say, they don't.
60 years, Margaret, 60 years later, we have basically the same enrollment from the 4 base towns.
I was
It's
gonna say,
interesting.
that's
It's
the
gone
thing
up and
with-
down. I mean, it's fluctuated, but really interesting.
Well, what did it go up to? I mean, we're down from what it was.
Yeah, it
Oh,
had been in
the
it had been
80s.
Everybody's
The
down.
80s and 90s there was 900, 800, 900
Oh, it was a lot.
students
Yeah,
there.
it was a lot.
All right, anyways, all right, so what we're gonna talk about? But that was the essence of communication with, what we tried to say with Frontier tonight. We just wanna be part of the, sit down at the same table.
What I heard is that they were very willing to do that. I mean, that's what I heard tonight.
Now,
That-
tonight.
As are we.
Right.
Margaret was
Now.
gonna contact them and
Correct. And if that happens, then it's a big plus. And it's a win for all of us. So that's what we're hoping for. So, But as to the question, if we have to put it on, I don't think there's nothing that says, in my opinion, according to my understanding of the law, is the selectmen control the warrant.
Yes, that's correct. That is the law.
Unless something specifically says on capital project, if it was part of their budget, I'm sure we would have to
Yes.
put something on,
Based on the agreement.
based on the agreement. I haven't seen anything from Donna McNichols, who's their school counsel. So, because I haven't seen anything that's telling me there's probably nothing that makes us have to do it. But I would say that there has to be a level of comment, of professional respect, that I would vote to put it on just because they're,
It's been the prerogative of
It
this
was
board.
yeah, it was.
I mean, it's been a prerogative of us, if someone requests something, library trustees, school
Right.
committee,
Right.
an elected board, especially an elected board, we would put it on.
That's the same thing you're doing there.
That's the same thing we're doing now, right. We would put it on just because that would be out of respect that they're an elected, so we would put it on. We'd make our recommendation, which may not
Right.
be consistent, but we would put it on. Was that consistent? What?
That's the way we've operated for a decade now. Again,
Okay.
I think it's been very, very important.
Okay, so moving on.
All
All right, so that article that would stay on the draft warrant in some way, shape, or
You
form.
have to fix that.
I would be fixing those
All right.
costs, yes. Okay, the next three articles are CPA articles, or CPC articles, I should say. The first one is to appropriate $22,000 from the Historic Resources Reserve to fix the windows at the Graves Building.
Yep.
Second one is $2,000 from the Historic Resources Reserve and $20,000 from the CPA undesignated reserve to fund the town office building exterior and interior restoration.
What are you doing?
How is that allocated? I'm just curious. How is that? How?
Where's it go? I know we want it to be on that northwest wall, I get it. but-
Because
Yeah, yeah.
when you set up the CPC account,
Mhm.
10% of your total money, 10% of your total money that comes in has to be done for historic preservation. 10% has to be recreation, 10% has to be for
How's it?
Open space.
open
How's
space.
it?
So when they say that they use appropriate 2,000 from the historic reserve, they set aside
Oh, it's a 10.
up
Got
for
it.
that 10%.
Got it.
And why you do that is so the state can always come back and say, and when they're looking at making sure you're spending the right
Yeah, got it.
proportions, you have a historic reserve, you have a or historical preservation, open space and recreation.
Smart.
So there's not a lot of detail in the article itself, and however, I mean, it can easily be explained by the CPC. They understand the work required.
Mr. Chair, point of clarification.
Yes,
We just reviewed 20,000 for the historic resources to repair windows at the Sunderland Historic Commission,
the Grays Memorial Library.
Graves
yeah.
Memorial Library.
Yep.
Do we want to move to include, and if so, do we want to move to recommend?
Yes.
Motion to include.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
3-0.
Motion to recommend.
Second, sorry.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
3-0, Margaret.
Okay, that's one.
Next article is for the town office building for the CPA.
I'll move to include.
Motion to include.
Second.
All those in favor of inclusion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Oh, I'm sorry, what is it again?
2-1.
2-1,
Include or recommend?
Oh, that was to
2-1.
include.
That was to include.
okay.
Motion to recommend.
Motion to recommend.
So moved.
Waiting for a second. Second. I'll second.
Okay, motion made and seconded to recommend.
Okay. And again, this is work that has to get done.
I
All
understand.
those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Wait a second, what is the real vote on the recommendation?
It
Oh,
was a
geez,
it was
it
a
must be 9:30.
I'd like to revisit that, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye,
Aye.
Nay.
Opposed?
Nay.
2 to 1.
2 to 1.
Okay.
That's the town office building
I understand.
pro-
We understand.
article, right? Okay.
Yeah,
I've lost track.
it was a lengthy thing.
There was,
It took a while.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
then the third.
Third is actually to take the annual revenues and then distribute accordingly to their appropriate buckets in the CPC format.
Right.
Motion to include.
Second.
Motion to include and then approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Margaret, 3-0. Next.
You want a motion to recommend, or you want to all at
Okay.
once?
I just did all at once.
Okay.
That's a procedural
You
thing.
have to move it, right.
That's a
Right.
procedural.
It's got to go in those buckets.
Okay.
That way that the state can track where the money's going.
Correct.
Got it.
And there's something to appropriate from.
Correct.
Okay. And you've got the next right here is OPEB. Is that this OPEB article?
That's the OPEB article. I was hoping that I would have a summary. Oh, no, the next one is stabilization fund. Free cash, right after the CPA, in
Mhm.
bold, is to appropriate money to the stabilization fund. Right now, the stabilization fund balance is 5% of the town's cash reserves,
Mhm.
5% of the operating budget. And DOR wouldn't frown upon that level being in the stabilization fund. However, the town's free cash policy allows for you could put 10%
Mhm.
in stabilization.
This
So,
is straight stabilization, not capital.
straight
Straight
stabilization.
Sure.
If stabilization is being treated like a rainy day fund,
Right.
something, okay.
Move to include? I'm sorry. Move to include.
Move to include.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to include. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 You're gonna put a number in there for next week for us?
Mhm.
Excellent.
I think the number is 39,000, I can't remember, I have
Yeah,
it.
he's
I'll
got
plug it
Next
in.
week.
Great.
OPEB.
OPEB,
You wanna pass this right now?
I'd love to pass it right now because I do want to have a summary for
Do
the
you wanna
board.
vote to include it?
I would love for the board to vote to include it.
Include.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to include. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We're in, Margaret.
Wow. Okay, on. This is unfortunately, Lee wasn't in today to help me fine tune this wording and put the number in, so we'll have to hold this. However, there is gonna be funding sought for GIS.
Okay, go ahead.
Move to include?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to include. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
3-0, Margaret.
The next article
Payoff
is
for this
on
one.
the debt, the $2 million elementary school long-term debt payoff. Language is to be fine-tuned and reviewed by council, but this article, the treasurer has recommended this article be included.
Move to include with joy.
Second, with glee.
Motion to include, which is the debt payoff on the Sunderland Elementary. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
3-0, Margaret.
Okay. Next
Dog
is.
licenses.
Next, we do have to hold, because the legislature actually repealed this section of statute that this refers to at the end of
Next.
2012.
Next.
Next. Okay, next is Quinn bill. Next is the first of two potential articles on Quinn. The first would be, they can be in any order, but the first would be to rescind Quinn. The second is by citizen petition.
Okay, so we've got the first article. This is to rescind the Quinn bill.
Rescind the town meeting vote. Yep.
Okay.
I actually asked to include this, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Do you wanna discuss it tonight, or you wanna hold on your discussion?
I think I'll hold on to discussion, only in that, even if this proves to be a discussion point at town meeting floor,
Mm-hmm.
that's the larger of the two initiatives here.
Okay. We have a motion to include. Is it second?
Second.
We have a motion made and second to rescind the Quinn bill.
To include,
To include. To include the rescission of the Quinn bill.
exactly.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
3-0 for the inclusion.
Yep.
Right.
Article, the next article is a citizen petition, so we don't have to vote on the inclusion, it's there.
It's there.
That's what's
By law.
there.
That's
Mass
right.
General
That's
law.
right, that's right.
So basically, we have received a citizen's petition that would like to restore the full funding, 100% funding of the Quinn, which would be an additional $15,704. Boy, that's interesting number, because because right now the town pays its 50% share of the Quinn, and the state has reneged on its obligation.
Mhm.
So now the petition is requesting the town pick up the state share.
From the time the state stopped paying, not the current year.
Oh, it's like retroactive?
That is correct. Is that not true?
I think it's actually half of
Just
the,
the current year?
yeah, half of,
Okay.
I think, and this would be effective in the coming
Yeah.
year.
Okay. My
And
apologies. I
they're
don't
also
want-
asking to continue funding it for every year thereafter.
And I
Yep.
don't want to misrepresent, so.
All right, so this is on because it's by citizen petition. Citizen petition just has to have 10 signatures, and it meets those requirements. Next.
The next, Mr. Chair, if I could, I'd like to not include, as part of a strategy.
Which one?
This next article was about a funding source for the continued negotiations and potential purchase at Sugar Bush, but those negotiations are not in a position for this
Okay.
article.
And it doesn't exist.
Negotiations what?
There's no reason for this to be on the annual town meeting warrant.
All right, doesn't exist. Next one.
These are all done.
These are
They're all done. The board has taken care of all the consent articles. There's no recommendation on them yet. You voted to include all of them, so
We could do that.
haven't changed.
Motion to recommend consent articles.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
3-0. We'll be done by 8:30.
I was thinking.
Yeah, well, Pacific
You
time?
was thinking 7? I don't think so.
8:30 Pacific time.
I don't care how nice the format is, it won't be done at 7:30.
Okay, we are,
that's it.
so Margaret, you'll have a couple,
Pieces of homework.
are your assessors numbers up to date in the article? Article 2?
Yes, they are.
That reflects your 2% increase that
That's
they?
correct.
Okay. Board updates, administrator updates.
Solar, town's still awaiting, getting into the utilities queue for the interconnection.
I saw they're looking for some additional information.
They were, and Broadway has
provided, wasn't it?
responded.
Correct.
So, and Beth
Later today.
has been right on it, so
Okay.
thankfully.
I didn't see it, what they were, I just know interconnection agreements are they need to be very precise. And Western Mass Electric is, skilled at these negotiations.
They were looking for time current curves.
Yeah,
Love that stuff.
yeah, okay. Anything else, Margaret?
We have the primary warrant. I'm sorry, the
Well,
annual.
you had new appointment guidelines, they're revised, that's very easy, all we want to add, all we need to add, is that job applications be submitted for all new employee appointments. That was not part of the guidelines and should be.
Okay.
Okay.
So you bring this now for our review and we can vote on it next week?
Yes.
Okay. Next up, FERCog Emergency Comm System Memorandum.
Yeah, this is the annual MOU. And you'll see that the fire chief has given his recommendation on executing the MOU.
Is it verbatim from last year? I say that only in that the COG we have had some contractual language issues with the COG
Yes.
in the past.
Would the board allow me to take this week to review compare this with
Thank you,
last
Bob.
year's agreement and bring it back next week to make sure that there's nothing hiding in there?
Next week, I want a limited
Yes.
agenda. I just want to talk about budget and town meetings.
Done.
Okay.
That's it.
I'll just bring
Move-
this back for recommendation for the board to sign if nothing shows up. How's that?
Okay.
Perfect.
All right? That's fine.
Again, I always say that, Mr. Chair, because there have been years where language has popped in and popped out.
That has.
Good point.
Okay. Special state primary warrant.
Notice?
Yep.
To either of the constables of the town of Sunderland, greetings in the name of the Commonwealth, you are hereby required to notify and warn, love that, the inhabitants of said city or town who are qualified to vote in the special state primaries to vote at the Sunderland Elementary School on Tuesday, the 13th of April, 2013. Polls will open at 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. for the following purpose: to cast their votes in the special state primaries for the candidates of political parties for the following office: Senator in Congress for the Commonwealth. Hereof fail not, and make return of this warrant with your doings thereon at the time and place of said voting. Given under our hands this 18th day of March, 2013. True copy and attested.
So we need to sign that, so motion to sign,
Move to sign?
Second.
motion to sign the special primary election on the 13th of April. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And this is for the senator in Congress. The annual town election warrant,
Annual town election warrant, we have from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, either the constables of the town of Sunderland and the county of Franklin. Greetings, in the name of the Commonwealth, you are hereby directed to notify and warn inhabitants of said town qualified to vote in the elections and in town affairs to meet at the Sunderland Elementary School in said Sunderland on Tuesday, April 30th, 2013, between the hours of 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. to cast their votes for the following question. These are elected of offices here. Assessor, 1 position for 3 years. Board of Health, 1 position for 3 years. Library trustee, 3 positions for 3 years. Moderator, 1 for 1 year. Planning board, 1 for 5 years. Planning board, 1 for 1 year. Riverside Cemetery trustee, 1 for 3 years. Sunderland Elementary School Committee, 1 for 3 years. Sunderland Elementary School Committee representative to the Town Park Trustees, 1 for 1 year. Frontier Regional School Committee, 1 for 3 years. Frontier Regional School Committee, 1 for 1 year. Selectmen, 1 for 3 years. Town Clerk, 1 for 3 years. Town Park Trustee, 1 for 3 years. And the following ballot question: shall the town of Sunderland be allowed to assess an additional $75,000 in real estate and personal property tax for the purpose of funding the town's municipal capital stabilization fund for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2013?
motion,
Motion.
Second?
all in favor?
Aye.
For posting. Margaret, anything else?
No, nothing.
This is Margaret's fun time of the year.
Oh,
Indeed.
Right, Margaret?
it's fun.
All right, so next week, we just want to talk about budget and special town meeting.
Yes.
Warrant articles, we should have everything basically in place, so we should be able to.
You will actually have to, next week, you'll have to sign the special town meeting warrant. It's gotta be posted by next weekend.
Yeah, we're all set, we
Okay.
just gotta put numbers out and
Yeah.
everything.
Yep.
Right?
Very good.
Anything else?
No.
David?
Don't think so.
All right, next selectmen's meeting next week, the 8th. We will be here, 7 o'clock.
Same bad channel, same bad
That's
time.
right. Ah.
Ah. Motion to adjourn.
Can we get that little spin-out graphic?
I like it.
You can second the adjournment?
Second.
You've been a little slow today.
I'm
You
a
were
little
slow
tired.
getting to
I
the
know,
first
I
meeting
know.
too.
Yeah.
All right, motion made, second, all in favor?
Aye.
We're out of here. Thank you, Tom Z.